A late-night vigil at the National War Memorial at the end of a week of turmoil and sadness in Ottawa. The ceremony was in honor of the two servicemen killed this week by men professing to be extremist Muslims. And now the mother of the killer of one of those servicemen is contradicting some of what the RCMP has said about her son. National Affairs editor Chris Hall has the details.
Zehaf-Bibeau wrote to the National Post to say that the RCMP incorrectly stated that she had been told by her son that he intended to go to Syria, which makes some sense if you're an extremist or a jihadist. Syria is where ISIS in particular has a very strong presence and is waging war. But what she said she told them was that he intended to go to Saudi Arabia to study the Qur'an, that he felt trapped in his life here in Canada. And as details have emerged over the last several days, Rashmi, it was clear that not only did Michael Zehaf-Bibeau have an extensive criminal record for drug and violent offenses, but that he also had difficulty getting along with even mosques in some parts of the country. So there were some mental health issues with him. And why it's significant is that if the narrative is in part as we lead to the potential for new legislation to deal with stronger anti-terrorism measures, that Zehaf-Bibeau's motivations still aren't completely known. Was he just a loner, somebody who had a lot of trouble adapting to life in Canada and wanted to go to study the Quran, or was he in fact intending to travel to Syria to try and join a jihadist movement? So these are questions that still have to be answered, and very important questions. Well, certainly in Parliament Hill, the RCMP will now be guarding the entrances to the Centre Block and other buildings. The Prime Minister will have basically a guard around the clock of RCMP officers who are armed. Up until now, once he actually entered the parliamentary precinct, he was handed over to common security officials. So there's been a long time concern about the overlap and the lack of communication, for example, between these various forces. On the legislative front, as early as tomorrow, we expect the government will introduce this amendments to the CSIS Act that have been planned for last week. This would give the CSIS agents broader powers of surveillance and detention to share more information with the so-called Five Eyes allies, intelligence forces or intelligence agencies from the United States, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. And perhaps as soon as later in the week, we'll also see some changes to the criminal code, among other things that would potentially make it a crime to support groups like ISIS online or through Facebook, make it a crime to promote hatred against various groups, identifiable groups. So these are measures that may very well test the solidarity we saw on Parliament Hill after the tragic events of Wednesday. The opposition, the NDP in particular, warning that it may be too soon to rush into these kinds of changes. Some experts saying police forces already have significant powers to make preemptive arrests in cases of suspected terrorism, powers that they really haven't used. So we'll be watching for both those things as this week unfolds.
National Affairs editor Chris Hall in Ottawa.